Right, lovely. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us. So I've been asked to talk about the Discovering Potential model, the Think, Get, Keep, which hopefully you will be aware of, or at least will have to become aware of, because I think it's now definitely part of the projects, the community learning and mental health projects. So today I thought what I would do is I'm going to go over what the Think, Get, Keep model is, and just to obviously either remind people if they haven't heard me talk about this before, or they haven't heard about it from Katina or Sally or any of the others involved in the team. So what is it, where does it come from, why do we do this model, etc. And then I thought that we would have a bit of a discussion about how the model impacts on recruitment, retention and achievement, or how it helps people to access learning, stay in learning and actually fulfil to their kind of full potential. Then I thought we'd have a look at the wheel, because I thought it would be useful for us to kind of think about, through the model, the kind of skills that learners could develop that they might already have, so recognising the skills they already have, but also thinking about, as the process is a learning process in itself, how they might actually, you could help them capture what they are learning. And then if we have time, we can go on to the kind of how the model impacts on mental health and well-being. So that's the kind of plan for today. So moving on, and do feel free to kind of interrupt me at any stage, but the Think, Get, Keep model came about from work that was done kind of in the late 1990s, early 2000s, working on projects that were happening at the time to support people with mental health problems to access learning. It was also around projects and things like prescriptions for learning, where learning advisors were based in GP surgeries to support people into learning and other activities. And it also, actually, to be honest with you, we drew on some work that was happening in the States, in Boston, in the Centre for Psychosocial Rehabilitation, where they had developed a model called Choose, Get, Keep. But we wanted to kind of emphasise the kind of thinking skills that people were developing as they had to engage in this model and were developing. So it has a kind of a history. It's not just something that's kind of come out of nowhere. And basically it recognises that some people experience greater social, emotional, cultural and structural barriers to learning. So the barriers that people have within themselves that are around lack of confidence and self-esteem, anxiety. It might be around the kind of cultural barriers, that learning some things are for, those sort of things are for women, or those are for men, or those sorts of kind of cultural ideas that people have around certain things. But it's also about acknowledging the structural barriers that people experience. So things like cost, time, accessibility, etc. So it was about saying that we need to acknowledge that, and we need to support people to help them kind of overcome those barriers. But it's not just about accessing learning, it's also about recognising that actually some people experience those barriers about remaining in learning and certainly progressing. So certainly the remaining for learning, that people, it's about dealing with setbacks and how do you overcome those kind of glitches that can occur when you're trying to do something, but also about progressing. It's about saying that for some people the kind of overcoming barriers is about that they take a small step in the right direction, but it's a step and we need to help people then take the next step on their kind of learning journey. So it's about access, remaining in and progressing in learning. But it's not just about kind of the challenges and the barriers that people experience. It's not just a kind of deficit model. It's also about recognising that people already have a lot of coping strategies, and helping people to recognise that the strategies that they use in other areas of their life can be kind of applied to getting into and getting on and learning, and about encouraging people therefore to kind of create an independence in learning. So it's not just about that they always need the support of a project like yours, or the support of kind of guidance workers. It's about people understanding that they can themselves navigate the system and become independent in their learning. So it is about a learning process. It's also about learning about yourself, about what the skills and abilities you have, etc. But it's also about learning the skills that you develop through the process. So we often tend to think about that, learning is what happens in a kind of classroom, and that we capture those learning outcomes. But this is about saying, well, actually through that process of, not being a learning to getting to where you want to be is in itself a learning process, and that people will develop a lot of skills along the way. It promotes health and well-being. For lots of reasons. One is just the process of sitting down and somebody talking to you for, say, 30, 40, 50 minutes can be very valuing. Someone taking an interest in your learning and your progress. It helps you, it raises your self-esteem, somebody helping you through the kind of challenges that you're experiencing, helping you to realise how you can overcome that, gives you a sense of control, etc. So there is a lot to be said for the process and the fact that it promotes health and well-being. And as I said, it's important to recognise and capture all those outcomes from that process. So that's where the Think, Get, Keep model comes from and what it's about. So just to go over them, it is a cyclical model, if you like, although those arrows only go in one direction. We of course know that you're going to move backwards and forwards, and obviously, although we like to think that it's nicely compartmentalised, actually there are some blurring between the lines. But basically starts off with the thinking, and that's about the time that you spend with somebody thinking about what it is that they want to do. So exploring goals and ambitions, etc. Helping people to explore their current situation, but also the opportunities that are available and what it is that they want to do. Understanding kind of what skills and abilities people have, what it is that they want to build on, but also importantly what might be holding them back. So when people then start to say, well, actually this is what I want to do, they're working on the basis of a very kind of an understanding of what it is they're doing and why they want to do it, and their kind of current starting position, if you like. So it's not just a signposting. There is a kind of deeper understanding about, if you like, their sense of direction, their sense of purpose. And then we move into the getting stage, and I always kind of think that this is often the practical stage, where people then move into the perhaps researching in more detail the opportunities that are available to them, things like cost, eligibility criteria, travel, etc. And thinking about actually what are the practical things that need to happen for somebody to kind of get to where they are now to where they want to be. And that might be the kind of acknowledging of things like sorting out caring, childcare, or it might be applications and CV writing, but it also can be acknowledging basic things like that if they've never actually used an adult education centre, they have a great deal of anxiety about it. So it's about helping them to think about what that's going to be like for them, and it might even be things like walking through the door with them and making sure that there's the kind of, if you like, that literally that hand-holding process is in place. So it's the thinking about what they want and how they're going to get it, and then presumably they start on a course, and then it's about keeping. And we know that for some people, keeping and learning can be difficult. Well, it can be for anybody, because life gets in the way, or and we might need to sort out things. We might not be learning as quickly or as easily as we wanted to, and we need to sort out some learning support. It can be about maintaining motivation, that kind of, I don't know if it's a cold, wet evening and you've got to go out to join your class, or you've got to get up in the morning or whatever. So it's dealing with some of the setbacks when the learning opportunity hasn't quite met with your expectations, or it's difficult, or it's challenging. And also for some people, actually dealing with success when suddenly finding out that you're good at something and you're doing well is in itself quite a frightening prospect. So it's about making sure that people have those skills to sorry, I'm distracted. So to make sure that they have the skills to kind of keep going in learning. And then because it's a cyclical process, it's also about then going through into a thinking process again. So once you're on a course, it's therefore then about thinking, what's my next step? Where do I go now? What have I learned through this whole process of being not in learning to being in learning? How have I changed? What are my ambitions now? What's next? And thinking about how do I get that follow-on opportunity? So as I said, a kind of cyclical process. Sometimes it goes backwards. They are kind of blurred to a certain extent, but simplistically, that's what it's about. So does that make sense? Is everybody okay with that? Yep. Okay. So moving on, what I thought was we'd actually perhaps have a bit more of a discussion at this stage and think about this model in terms of how it impacts on recruitment, retention and achievement. So if you were going through that model, how does using the model impact for you as providers on your thinking about recruitment, retention and achievement? How does that impact for you? Does anybody want to kick off with any kind of comments or thoughts on that? Does what I'm saying make sense to people?
If you want to unmute and speak, that's absolutely fine, or if you want to use the chat pane, please do.
Hi, Kathryn, it's Brenda.
Hi, Brenda. You're right.
Hiya. I'm all right, thank you. For me, the model is just like, an information, advice and guidance framework. So it's about actually using it to move through the stages, but also dropping in at the stage that's relevant. So in a lot of ways, we'll use it as a model at the initial stage to actually generate the conversation around the SMART survey, but we'll also use it in the middle and the end stages as well with the learners, so that we'll be able to help them to identify where the gaps are and what needs to be worked on, really. So it's not dissimilar to frameworks I've used like Egan anyway, it's just a bit more expanded for me. It fits quite well.
Yeah, and it's about recognising the interventions, isn't it, throughout the whole of the kind of learner journey. Yeah, but as a service provider, if you like, how do you think it impacts on, say, recruitment or retention?
I think in that respect, it allows us actually to probably target the groups that we want to be thinking about in terms of recruiting in particular sectors. So, for instance, if we look at maybe job centre plus referrals perhaps, or people that are linked into the job centres that are dealing with particular aspects of the wheel. So they may have barriers or skill blocks in particular areas. So in that sense, we could actually target recruitment or course delivery to pick up some of those elements specifically, which might attract groups that we don't currently have in a more focused way.
Right. And retention?
I think that goes back to the point I was making about actually working with them on where the weaknesses lie in particular aspects of the wheel. So in terms of getting them to see it as a progress review mechanism and a sustainment mechanism. So where there are gaps in their competences and skills, then we can build on that in order to retain them and let them see that they can actually achieve those things through attending or participating in what we're offering.
So
I haven't used it, Kathryn, yet. I haven't used it yet, so I don't know how it will be. We've certainly used it at the moment when we're doing when we've been looking at the SMART service offline. We've been using it with people then to see how they respond to it, and there's been a mixed response in terms of some people really like it and they love having something to fiddle with and to talk through, and some people find it quite challenging in terms of too much to think about at once, if you know what I mean. So I think we need to be very careful how we use it in terms of identifying particular segments to use.
Right, okay, but you're talking specifically about using the wheel now.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to try and use the wheel as part of the ILP process.
Right, okay. But just before we think about the kind of wheel, I was just wondering whether you had noticed or you think that this kind of idea around recognising the importance of a kind of an IAG process, not just of access, but of remaining and succeeding, whether that you think has any impact on your recruitment or retention. Does because the theory is, isn't it, that right people on right courses, they stay
it's been I suppose it's been my stock in trade, so I don't think about those things because that's what I've been trained to do, and that's what I'm professionally qualified to do. So the role of IAG in recruitment and retention has always been absolutely central for me. So it's not something I see as something I really think about. I suppose it's something that comes naturally to me. It's absolutely crucial in the communication with people and in the quality of the information, advice and guidance that's given, that allows us to recruit the right people to the right courses and to retain them. And it needs to be delivered at the right level at the right time for people.
Yeah. Does that make sense for other people listening in?
Kathryn, hi, it's Nicola.
Hi, Nicola.
Hi, yeah, it does make sense. I think the whole think, keep, get, keep does make sense, because I think it's going to keep the learners involved in their own, like you say, strategizing to keep themselves independent, etc. So you're giving that, extra model for them to work with, to sort of say, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. So on top of the ILP, what we're thinking here is, I just want to ask, with the discovering potential model, so this model that we're looking at and the wheel, etc., is it better to be embedded in a lesson as opposed to a separate thing, or they kind of can be separate, or?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Nicola, because I was kind of thinking about this, and I think that we kind of call it an IAG, and therefore, like Brenda's just alluded to, is the fact that we have kind of people who are kind of professionally, that's their professional job, if you like, to do that process. But I think that this is about almost any, well, it can be any one-to-one situation, can't it, between the learner and any member of staff, that helps that learner to kind of think about and what they need, what they want, get it and maintain. So it can happen in the classroom. I think there are also times when it happens in a kind of group situation, doesn't it? And it can be very explicitly that you can be talking about this. So you might, as a group, be talking about, what next, and what are we going, what do you want to do? So it can happen in lots of different ways. But to me, the important thing is that it's about making the process kind of explicit, isn't it? People, and making it explicit that, if you like, of the process that people that they're going through and what they're learning and developing as they go through it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good model to sort of definitely support and be one with the ILP process. They sort of come as a package deal, really, don't they? They're sort of one of the same things. So it's just giving that bit more depth to it than probably we would have normally just sort of running an ILP in a session. It just gives that. What we're planning to do in Peterborough is possibly putting an IAG specialist into the classroom, so the tutor doesn't get too distracted, spending time with the survey that we've got to do, and also the additional sort of questions. But it gives that learner the time to sort of just, they're in the classroom, they're not pulled aside as such, but they get a chance to speak to someone focused on these particular questions, etc. So it gives that bit more in depth than the ILP they just do on their own as such.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That's a good way of using the model.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think so, yeah. I think the other thing is that it's because we're making the model explicit and helping people to understand their skills, it also helps them to realise that everybody uses this skill, don't they, all the time, and we use them in other situations. If you're going to buy a new car for a certain situation, you're thinking about what you want, you then think about what is, I've got to get a loan and etc. And then there's about actually you know, you get your car and you keep it. So we all do it. So it's about helping people to sort of say that they have these skills and they can apply them. They've already got them and they can apply them in other situations. So when we did lots of prescriptions for learning projects, one of the things that people said was that once they had accessed learning and understood that kind of process, they realised they could apply that process of thinking about what they wanted, how they were going to get that, what support they would needed, and they applied that to all sorts of situations in their lives. Yeah, so it's a kind of almost like it's a life skill, isn't it, that we're...
Yeah, and you can see that because I've been on courses and sort of more academic courses where you get to do the reflective journal at the end, and you all sit there and go, really, I don't really want to reflect on myself. Whereas if you're sort of embedding it throughout with more generalised questions that are, you know, like you say, linked to everyday life, it makes it less of a mandatory process as opposed to, like you say, integrated part of their learning. So yeah, in that way.
Yeah. The other bit that I'm kind of interested in talking about with you all is about, if you go through this process with learners and you are talking about what they want and what it is they're interested in, do you think that will have a knock-on impact on the offer that you make available to people? Does that make sense as a question?
Do you mean in terms of if you set something up and they say they want something totally different, and then you've got to sort of mould that to their specifications, or?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. I think, you know, if you sit and you kind of talk to 10 learners and 5 of them have said, actually what we want is, I don't know, a creative writing course, and you haven't got one, then it's kind of market intelligence, isn't it, for you to...
Yeah, well, hopefully though, and I don't know if other projects are doing the same, but we have the initial IAG before they go onto the course. So with using the discovery potential model at that point, which I think we will have to do, it should hopefully mean that they're not on the wrong course to start with. But in terms of when they get on the course and we work through some of these think, get, keeps, and something slightly changes, hopefully within most lessons you should be able to implement something that they need through differentiation or through, you know, experience that they're putting onto the course, etc. So I think it helps you to weed out what different learners want and therefore plan your lessons. But in terms of getting on the right course, I'd hope that'd be done at the recruitment stage.
Yeah, but so it is at all stages. There is a kind of a bit of a customer service and a market intelligence process going on really as well, which again is going to have a knock-on achievement impact on recruitment, retention, achievement. Yeah. Okay. So just moving on then, when I was looking at this, I was kind of thinking about, well, how would it, you know, impact? So those were just some of the things which I thought that the impact was. So it is about acknowledging the kind of barriers, helps people to get onto the right course. I think that as somebody who's kind of used this model in service provision, one of the big learning lessons, the lessons that I learned from doing this and talking, was actually understanding where the barriers to participation were, and that when you work in a service, you take all sorts of things for granted, and then you don't realise how difficult they are for people, or how they make some people anxious, etc. So it kind of also helps you to make your own service much more accessible and inclusive. And again, it's also about, you know, that we have assumptions about what people might want to learn, but when we talk to people about what it is they're interested in and what their ambitions are, that helps us also to kind of, if you like, customise the offer that we have and the curriculum that we have. It's also, as Nicola's just been talking about, it's also about, helps you to understand the kind of differentiated learning needs and how you make the learning in the classroom much more inclusive and accessible. And all of those things hopefully are going to drive up achievement and successful learning and progression and moving on. So so that was the thought about how we use the model for recruitment and retention. Moving on though, because you have now got the circle, have you got a chance now to, right, I don't know how I have to do this. You've all got the wheel, is that right? Have you all got this wheel? Yeah. So Sally, you might want to interject here, but basically this wheel, which was used some time ago with Take 10 People, has now been resurrected, and we're looking at the various skills that we think that people are looking at throughout the whole, that people are developing, they have or they're developing throughout the whole process. So resilience, personal skills such as confidence, being very positive, and personal presentation, taking a positive approach, so commitment, enthusiasm, flexibility, communicating, so speaking and listening, understanding and managing language, using language in various formats, number skills, problem solving, planning time, etc., and finance, progress to work or volunteering, so timekeeping, teamwork, challenging stereotypes, customer care, IT skills, and social media, and progression in learning such as persistence and listening to other learners and developing positive relationships, and finally taking responsibility. So looking after yourself and pride in your work, etc., and looking after your general well-being. So all of these skills are the sorts of skills that learners will come to you with in varying degrees, or they may have at times gaps in. They also, through the process, through their learning on what they're learning, but also through the process of their kind of learning journey, will begin to develop these. It's important to kind of make those explicit, because these are all important employability skills, and the sorts of skills that people will need for higher learning. So I just wondered, just in kind of good kind of just to generate some discussion, really, whether we could have a look at a kind of case study of a kind of learner. So this is a case study of Bob, who at the time of seeing a guidance worker is rarely leaving his house, spending time sitting alone and smoking. He agrees to attend an interview because he says he wants to get out more. Because he's almost reclusive in his house at the moment, but he wants to get out more. He wants to be able to manage his mental health. And during the guidance interview, he also says he wants to be able to write stories, and he's never actually admitted that before. So he joins a course. Well, in discussing joining the course, he admits that he is very worried about joining the course because he has to get a bus across town. Up until then, he's been very, as I said, reclusive, hasn't been out very much, and because he's never been in an adult education centre, so he has absolutely no idea what it's going to be like. But he joins the course, and throughout the course he attends regularly, gets on well with everybody, sometimes outside of class meeting classmates for coffee. He's developed IT skills, regularly posts to Facebook, and has written a class blog, and is helping other people. And he now says he spends his evenings reading rather than doing nothing. So just to kind of generate a discussion, if you were thinking about the Think, Get, Keep, could you identify, if you like, the sorts of skills that he might be using, or he might already have, and certainly developing through those kind of key stages? Is there any thoughts there? So using the wheel.
Again, do you want to turn your mics on or pop things into the chat pane? I mean, he must have IT skills, Kathryn, because he's helping the rest of the class with IT. Yeah.
So part of that is he's developing IT skills. So I suppose that might be in the kind of keep stage. But certainly when you review that and come round, he may well actually use those IT skills in a different way, mightn't he?
The communicating.
Yeah. Do you want to say more?
I guess he's understood that he's sitting at home. He hasn't got the communication skills to be in a sort of public area. That's why he's not sort of gone out very far. So it's sort of maybe thinking about how can he gain skills, or how can he meet people. because I've never used this model before, so I don't really know. I was just going to say, how does it work in terms of using the wheel? Do you pick which ones they should be focusing on, or do you ask the learners to pick which ones, or based on the course, or?
Well, that I think it's probably up to you. I don't think we should be looking at it in terms of a tick list of these are what you must develop. I don't think it's a kind of a necessarily needs to be a kind of, well, you can't do this, or you're not very good at that, or you are. I think it's almost like a kind of a prompt list, really, to help people to kind of begin to understand the skills that they have to use in everyday life and through the process. So if communicating, for instance, through thinking, he admits for the first time ever that he wants to write stories, wants to do creative writing. That's quite an important skill, isn't it? That to be able to open up and to be able to say, this is what I really want to be able to do. As well as he obviously has been able to talk about his mental health, etc. So there's communicating skills in the thinking, communicating skills perhaps in the getting, and certainly through the keeping, isn't he? He's talking more to other people in his class. He's supporting other people.
We have some comments in the chat pane, Kathryn.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility by attending the course.
Yeah.
And taking a positive approach by planning and managing travelling to the course.
Yeah.
And he's building his resilience as well by having a go and seeing that he can do it and staying on the course. So he's going by bus, for example. So it hits quite a few of the targets. Some of those things would be evidence as achievement as you go through.
Yeah.
You know, have a go at this. By doing this, you will build your resilience, might be at the initial discussion, and then coming back and saying, look, you're doing it regularly. How do you now feel at travelling on the bus?
Yeah. So he's also developing that kind of persistence.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also an element about him actually beginning to think about his own mental health and well-being, isn't there? And to have more kind of strategy. So instead of sitting in the dark smoking all evening, he's now getting up and reading a book. So he's also developing some kind of self-care, if you like.
And he started helping other people. We have another one, taking a positive approach by planning and managing travelling to the course, progress and learning by forming relationships with other learners, both inside and outside the learning environment.
Yeah. So when you start to itemise it, you realise, don't you, actually how many skills people have to do what he's done, but also how the discussion also has got to be about how he can kind of perhaps build on things, use those skills to go to the next level.
So can I just ask, Kathryn, would it be, so you're having a conversation with Bob, and you sort of say, no, so what do you want to do? What do you do now? How are things and that? And he comes out with, he sits and smokes and he doesn't go out. He wants to get into learning. And then we sort of say, right, you could sort of show him the wheel and say, these are sort of areas. And then he'd sort of, under the descriptors of each, under resilience, he would find some descriptors and say, or like you say, you don't have to pinpoint things as such, or.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's about using skills to kind of think about what feels right at the time and what feels comfortable for you and for them. I mean, Brendan's just talked a bit about some people find it quite overwhelming, and it might well be that for some people you get a sense that they're not ready to kind of think about this, that actually just coming in and talking to you is enough, isn't it? But it's almost, there's something about, for me, about kind of logging where people are up to, so that, say, for instance, you get into the keeping stage, you could then introduce a wheel then, for instance, and some people, and actually get them to reflect on where they were. This is where you were then, but this is where you are now. Now think about the skills. So for me, it feels like actually you should use this in a way which is very intuitive rather than prescriptive, that feels right for you, and using your professional judgment about when it feels right for the learner. But I don't know, Brenda or any of the others, whether you want to make any comments about that.
Brenda's made a comment in the chat pane saying it's about getting the learner to identify the skills that sit in what Bob's doing at the moment and achieving. It helps them to get it helps to get them to mind map. So it helps a learner to think about where they are at the moment and what they might need to work on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think it's also about recognising when they're ready to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's one of the things that I found helpful is to do is the journal approach, which allows you in each session to support all the learners in the group to identify things that have come up in that session and to use feedback from other learners to help them to self-identify their gains in a session in terms of skills and achievements as they move through. And what the journal gives you, and it need only be something small, and it can be something very visual, and I would recommend that. What it does do is it allows the learner to use peer review. It allows the learner to actually self-identify, and allows it to be collated on an ongoing basis, so it builds, and therefore what you get is a journey rather than a point when you might intervene with particular input. So it's much better to do it in a steady, consistent way across all the elements of the course, and I think it can be very helpful that way.
I think that's a very good point, Brenda. And I think you raised an important issue there for me, which is that recognising what you're good at is in itself a skill, isn't it? And not just recognising, but being able to acknowledge it and talk about it is a kind of higher level skill. And so getting kind of peer feedback or tutor feedback is one step that allows people to kind of hear that. But actually, as they go through that process, keep a journal and reflect, one of the skills that is positive to learn, and actually, and it's quite important, I think, to make that explicit for some people, that it is important to know what you're good at, and not always just to think about what you can't do. So it's about using the process to help people realise the strengths that they have.
And that really helps to build somebody's confidence anyway, doesn't it? When perhaps you're struggling with self-esteem, if you've got mental health problems at the time. You have a couple more comments. So you've got a comment saying, yes, I like how you could use the wheel with a learner so that they can reflect and discover how far they have travelled. It's so easy to underestimate one's progress. The wheel can balance this out. And Brenda's just replied to your comment, that's right, and others often recognise these things better than ourselves, which is so true.
It's very true, isn't it? Yeah. I'm very conscious of time, and I just wonder whether we want to move on to, I've got one final slide, which is around self-esteem, and whether we just want to have a quick discussion about that. Yep. Okay, so when we did Discovering Potential, we were very struck that there's a way of doing this which helps to build self-esteem. So it was acknowledging that for some people, one of the biggest barriers to their participation is lack of self-esteem and confidence, and that the way that you can use this model helps to build self-esteem. So we looked at, there's a writer called Nathaniel Brandon, and he's written quite a lot about self-esteem, and he says that there are two aspects to self-esteem. One is how you feel about yourself, so do you feel good about yourself, do you, etc. What we usually think about as kind of confidence. And the other thing is about our actions and our sense of agency. So not just how you feel about yourself, but actually what you're prepared to do. So, you know, can you hear what is good about yourself? Can you actually talk about that and actualize your skills? And he said that for these two aspects of self-esteem, there are 6 pillars, and that is about living consciously, being aware of why you do things, and acting to your abilities, so living responsibly. So that's, you know, the kind of self-esteem comes from thinking, this is what I want to do, and this is because I'm, you know, I feel that I have these skills and therefore doing something. Not living consciously is perhaps when we don't actually make the most of our abilities. A self-acceptance, so fully accepting who you are and where you are at the moment, and knowing that you can change and grow. self-responsibility, that you take responsibility for your action and attainment of your goals, and have that sense of control, that you can feel, you know, if you like, a sense that you are the a sense of self-agency, I guess, is about that. And you know, nobody is going to come and rescue you. You have to kind of take responsibility for that. Self-assertiveness, so expressing your needs appropriately and having a belief that you have the power to make a difference, and that also that you will confront challenge and difficulties and deal with setbacks. That sense of living purposefully, so a sense of purpose and direction in life, that you can take initiative and you can translate your kind of wishes into reality. And again, lastly, personal integrity, that behaviour matches your values. And I really kind of put that in there if we got to this point, and I think we kind of touched on it, because it seems to me that the if we think about the model of Think, Get, Keep, quite a lot of what the process that you're going through with people is helping people to, if you like, develop those 6 aspects of their self-esteem. And a lot of the things in the wheel that you're helping people to identify really kind of map across very well to those 6 pillars. So I just really was going to say whether people kind of, that begins to make sense for people, that so the Think, Get, Keep model isn't just about getting people into learning and keeping them there, but it does actually also impact on people's mental health and well-being as the process, so not just being in a classroom, but everything that goes around that. So I was just whether there's any kind of comments or thoughts about that.
Brenda's just said it makes sense to her.
Right. I think one of the things that perhaps I will do when I have a moment is kind of map some of those across to some of the categories on the wheel.
Katina's making a point about some of the questionnaires and the surveys, and has said that the combination of short WMWIBs and about learning is designed to measure exactly that. Yeah. So in some ways, I think hopefully if we get that process right, where people aren't just kind of, we're not just signing people up to do a course and then that's it, but we're actually building that Think, Get, Keep model on, should therefore increase their scores and improve their kind of well-being. You should get better feedback on that, one would hope. Exactly. Katina's just added to that to say some people have recently mapped against the 3 pillars of recovery, which is in essence is the same as this. Because it's really important, isn't it, to see that you're building that you are building in yourself, that as you're learning, your learning's having an impact on your self-esteem. I think that self-awareness that you're talking about is so important.
The other thing about the Think, Get, Keep model is, of course, is that this isn't just what happens for learners, and it's not just about the service we're providing for learners, but it is also about ourselves as professionals, isn't it, and practitioners and managers, whatever level we're at, is about we need to kind of take a sense of responsibility for what we provide. We need to kind of think about where we are now and how we can develop ourselves professionally, thinking about, you know, our own kind of sense of values. So there is a lot in this also about our own professionalism, isn't there?
Absolutely. A few more comments. Katina's added on what would be good about all of this is that we have never managed to measure how and what we achieve in terms of self-esteem recovery, so this will help. Sarah said the self-esteem definition is something we can use in our Group A courses to help learners reflect on improved self-esteem. But Brenda's added this is relevant to all groups.
Yeah.
Planning to use it as part of a process for the staff and training I am doing tomorrow in Sunderland. So Katrina's off to do this in practice with the Sunderland projects.
Yeah, good.
I think the Think Get Keep is so important for all learners, but I particularly think it is going to be really useful with these mental health projects, because people do have low self-esteem, they do have anxiety, and having that discussion about have you thought about everything that might impact, have you thought about how you're going to get there, have you thought about the cost of bus fares, I think all of those things. Are you aware of having that discussion about what it's going to be like before you ever get to class? Showing them, taking them to meet their teacher, showing them what the class might look like from a little video snip, or hearing other learners talk about what it did for them. I think it all fits in, doesn't it, with building confidence and the ability to really motivate themselves to have a go. So when they wake up in the morning and it's a bad day and they're thinking, oh, I just sit here in my dressing gown or whatever, I can't get on that bus today. They've got that little extra thing of going, no, I can. They've done it, I can do it too.
I think you're absolutely right, Sally, and I think it all goes back to that sense of control, isn't it? And when the last webinar I did around the kind of impact of learning on health, that sense of control is the kind of key thing, isn't it? That helps. When you feel in control, you're much less likely to feel anxious and you're much less likely to feel stressed. So immediately it has an impact on your kind of mental health, and that goes for all of us. It's not just for these learners and for this group of learners. It's actually for all of us. If you don't feel in control of your work, you get more anxious. It happens to all of us. So this process helps people to feel in control, and actually, because it's a learning process, gives people back the control over their lives, doesn't it? Which is an important thing.
Absolutely. A couple of extra things come through. Sarah said it'll be good for her wider staff training in their service, so outside of the project, using across the service, which is great to hear. Yeah. And Katina has said, if you recall, that was why Dave Pedler created that Xerti resource to help people make it to their courses and come back, designed specifically for learners with mental health problems. They then found loads of learners used and wanted it, and it increased the number of people actually turning up across all the courses.
Yeah.
So maybe we can share that link again in connection with today's webinar.
Yeah.
Have we got any more? Sorry, Kathryn.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a really good point, because I think it's also about that kind of it should increase the kind of your recruitment and actually people keep maintaining their places, so it improves retention. And it was a piece of research that we did years ago on about attendance, and part of that was actually about people taking responsibility, for their own learning, so they need to turn up so that they could maintain their own learning and get on, but also recognising their sense of responsibility to the group. If they didn't turn up and the people didn't turn up regularly, then the group suffered. So it is about, isn't it, that it gives people, it does improve, I think, the quality of the learning experience for everybody.
Definitely. Mm. Yes, Brenda, we'll make sure that we circulate the link for that. Any more questions for Kathryn?
Can I just ask sort of your opinion on this, really? As I mentioned before, we were looking at putting in we're doing a 5-week course, so it's 3 times we've got to go into the class to do the survey, but rather than being onerous on the tutor and specifically stopping stuff for a group session so the learners can do their survey, we were going to put the IAG in as like a teaching assistant as such, and they sort of just go around, sit and have a chat to the learners as they're still continuing their classes. Is that okay to do that? Is it, or should it be embedded in the class with the tutor rather than someone separate, but they're not being pulled out separately or anything like that? I just didn't know if anybody had any ideas of if that's the right thing to do.
Can I just say that where we've tried the IAG through that mechanism, it's been difficult to control the quality of what's being delivered in the classroom. I think the key to it, Nicola, is actually the support and training for the people that you're using to deliver that, to get consistency of the IAG offer, of the quality of the discussions and the communication that goes on. I know we've moved away from that in our project because we found it too difficult to actually control that consistency and actually get the same quality conversations occurring. But so training and support for the people doing that is really key. But yeah, it can work. I think we just need to make sure that it's actually of the quality, so that we do get out of learners on our courses this kind of information about their self-esteem, and it's quite a skillful conversation to have.
Okay.
There's just another thought, and this, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. There is also something I think important about encouraging people to be proactive and actually seek out advice and guidance. So perhaps book their appointments and things like that. That in itself is kind of a skill, isn't it? To be able to think, actually, I need to go and talk to somebody about this and take some self-responsibility and actually go and book something. That's just an idea. I thought that instead of taking it to people, also encouraging people to actually go and seek it.
Yeah, and to be fair, when I was saying sort of, it was an IAG person I'm putting in there, but like I said, they're not going to be there for an IAG session. It's just more to support the tutor, rather than the tutor having to stop and get them all together as a group to do the questionnaires and speak about it. I suppose if you embed it in the right way in the class, it will naturally come out anyway, won't it? So
yeah, and I think actually the advantage of that model also is that it kind of breaks down that kind of barrier to, this person is interested in me, they're an approachable person, therefore I can go and see them outside of my class and actually make an appointment. So it kind of works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Is that all the questions then, Sally?
Any more questions? I think that is. Thank you very much, Kathryn.
Well, thank you. Good to talk to you all. I'm
going to stop the recording and say thank you, everyone. Don't forget, there's more webinars this week.